Let's talk about the PlayStation 5 Pro announcement. This was a little more recent, so I'm going to remember all the details a little bit better. But in a nutshell, Sony upgraded the GPU. I was a little surprised. We also get Wi-Fi 7, higher base storage. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was really upgraded going from the PS5 to the PS5 Pro, and I don't think so. There were some things I was a little surprised by. I didn't expect the CPU to stay Zen 2.
Yeah.
Already when the PS5 came out, I remember feeling like, oh yeah, it makes sense that it's Zen 2 because the development cycle for this is so long that it would have had to be, but boy, would it ever have been nice if they, if the dev kits were all Zen 2 and it was like Zen 3 for the real product, So I was a little surprised to see Zen 2 stick around. So the main things are it's got a better GPU, similar architecture, which again surprised me because we got to remember this product launched 4 years ago. I think it works out to, right? PS5 came out in 2020. PS5 release date. PS5, no, not the Slim, or was it 2022? Yeah, November 2020 was when the PS5 launched. So 4 years later, I was kind of expecting, I don't know, Zen 3 at the very least. I was expecting an architectural change to the GPU, but then as I was sort of working through the script with David, I was like, no, it actually makes sense because from Sony's perspective, the most important thing, because this is a mid-cycle refresh that realistically, they aren't going to sell a ton of.
Yeah. Especially
if you compare this to base PS5s or PS4s, right? These Pro models are for their more affluent customers. They're for the more discerning console gamer, right? Sips tea like this, right? Who can definitely see the difference in the pixels, or realistically, who can see the higher refresh, higher frame rates. So making sure that developers have continuity between the regular model and between the Pro model is way more important than squeezing a little bit more performance out of it. Wi-Fi 7, I think, is actually a pretty important upgrade that is maybe not being talked about enough, especially by us. We turned that video around extremely quickly. And so there were a couple things that I think weren't necessarily wrong, but are things that I would probably want to do differently to go back. I would talk about Wi-Fi 7, and especially in the PlayStation ecosystem where you might have a PS Portal and your PlayStation 5 Pro is not connected via Ethernet. Having Wi-Fi 7 and a Wi-Fi 7 router, even if your PS Portal doesn't support Wi-Fi 7, which it doesn't because it's a PS Portal, it would be better to have a stronger connection between the PS5 Pro and your router. It's still better. The better every link in the chain can be, the better off you're going to be. So Wi-Fi 7 is something I would have talked about more. I also would have more explicitly talked about the lack of a disk drive. That was something that we kind of glossed over. At the very beginning, we had a bit where, by the time you buy a stand, and I think David and I had talked about how the visuals should also have the disk drive and it should just add up the whole price and compare it to a thing. Because we said something along the lines of by the time you buy a disk drive, this thing costs darn near twice as much as a base model PlayStation, or costs about twice, or I forget exactly how we worded it. And I probably would have expanded on that more later. Because I think that people were pretty upset when they felt like we were justifying the price when we talked about how it wasn't Sony's most expensive console ever. That crown, actually corrected for inflation, goes to the PS3, which came out at $599, but that was back in, when did the PS3 come out? 2002? Oh boy, I'm going to get this wrong. 2006. Okay, so that came out way back in 2006. I said I'd touch on inflation. Quite a few people were really upset that we made a with inflation comparison to the PS3. And I'd like to explain why we did that. And the reason they were upset was because, and I get this, people are sick of seeing a price justified today because of inflation. Well, it's reasonable for it to be $700 because if you compare that to $500 for the PS3, inflationarily, they're very similar. In fact, that was more dollars back then. But that wasn't what we were saying. We weren't trying to justify the price. In fact, the very opening of the video
scaled with inflation.
I'll get to that. We weren't trying to justify the price, though. What we were saying was there's a precedent for this. That's what we were saying. This isn't their most expensive console.
So is that like one of the communication things that you would have wanted to change slightly?
I would have wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
And I can see why people are upset about it because, their wages haven't flipping scaled with inflation.
So the buying power of that much money is not the same, even if it's the same inflationary wise.
Exactly. Yeah. However, something that I feel like a lot of people overlook in stuff like this is that the costing of a product from a consumer electronics company like Sony is contingent on their costs for their sourcing. Do you think Sony makes power supplies? Does Sony have a power supply manufacturing plant?
Do you think it's that? I think it's more that there's no competition really in the space.
We talk about that, but okay. I just want to talk about the importance of why this inflation number matters. Sony buys power supplies from Light-On,
and those power supplies cost more now than they used to. Yeah,
because commodity prices have gone up in inflation.
Yeah.
Do you think Sony manufactures microprocessors? No. Do you think Sony has their own iron mines where they get iron to make steel?
If we were talking about Samsung, maybe. Who knows? They do everything.
That's true, but we're not.
But Sony, no.
Does Sony manufacture DRAM?
No.
Sony they're a designer, but they don't actually manufacture just about any of the raw materials of a PlayStation 5. Like, certainly they're doing board assembly.
And just like M Hop pointed out in Full Plane Chat, fab time is huge right now. Fab time is crazy right now.
Yep. Ranma Chan says, I saw a chart yesterday that showed how much TSMC is essentially gouging companies due to manufacturing capacity, and it's rough. Yep. And that was why the second thing I said was microprocessors. Yeah, Sony doesn't make microprocessors. We are in an environment right now where there's an effective monopoly on cutting edge node microprocessors. As much as it's been kind of hilarious for people who hate Intel, many of whom are justified, to watch them struggle with the rollout of their fab business, we should be rooting for them because Samsung has proven time and time again that they're just not going to catch TSMC.
Here's a hot take.
Then again, so is Intel.
I'm surprised they're as cheap as they are. With how few people can make them, cough, cough, one place. I think we're lucky that they're not making it way worse. And maybe they're not making it way worse because they know other companies would then have more opportunity to spring into the space, and they would rather there's less people competing, so they're happy to take their really significant cut that they are. But they have an effective monopoly on cutting edge chips. And the fact that they're not like just astronomically more expensive is, I think
Yeah, I remember seeing a quote from, I think it was TSMC's chairman or something like that, basically making the observation that NVIDIA's sure charging a lot for these AI processors.
Yeah, I don't remember that quote, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah, like, we could take more of that because who else is going to make it?
Nobody.
No one. Like they could effectively charge. There's limits to this, but practically anything for certain product lines that, like, a government is not going to just not buy it.
Yep.
So, like, I don't know. I think the fact that you can go out and buy a very respectable, super solid CPU for your computer for like $100 is, and it's from a monopoly that you're also going through middlemen for, is wild. Like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I think
they're cheap because they're a loss leader. You buy the console, and Sony gets the licenses when you sell the games. They have no competition right now.
Yeah, but you don't decide that.
That too.
That's not up to you.
Yeah, and when there is no competition, there's no real reason for them to do that.
Yep. And who's competing with the PlayStation 5 Pro right now? Microsoft?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Not
even a little bit. My understanding is the rumor is that Microsoft has actually canned their mid-generation refresh. I don't know if that will end up being true or if that's even the recent rumor mill. But Sony is effectively competing against absolutely nobody. And what they're selling is an experience that only has a value to those few who value it. And back to our conversation about the iPhone, because I think that in both cases, a lot of the criticism of our coverage came down to the same thing. Guys, Sony is not selling PlayStation 5 owners a $700 upgrade. Sony is selling people who want to buy a console a $700 console. And if you want a disc version, yeah, you're going to have to pay another $80 for an add-on disc drive. Dude, the writing's been on the wall for game discs forever. I think this is...
You think it's the last generation with disc drives?
Oh, man. I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Me too.
No. I think we're going to get one more. I think PlayStation 6 has a disc drive, but I think that it moves to this add-on model that we have now, and I think they de-emphasize it extremely heavily, and then I don't think PlayStation 7 has one. Okay, well, sorry, what was I saying? Right, so they're selling a $700 PlayStation to someone who wants a PlayStation 5, but like a bit better. And if you have a PlayStation 5 and you were going to upgrade to it, you wouldn't be paying $700.
PlayStation 5.
You would be selling your PlayStation 5 and you'd be paying whatever the difference is. So you'd probably get a few $100 for your PS5 and you'd pay $400 or whatever, which, if we're being realistic, 4 years into this product's life cycle, it's not a ridiculous amount of money. I wouldn't pay it.
No.
I have personally never bought a PlayStation.
That's not true. You never bought a current gen PlayStation?
No, I've never bought a PlayStation. I was given a PlayStation 2.
Oh, you were given that?
Yeah, I own it.
Darn it. Okay.
But I didn't buy it.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
I knew you had one.
Yeah, I got a PS2.
All right, fair. Thought I got you.
No, it was a gift.
Okay, so question, I'm jumping off topic from PlayStation. Do you have anything else to say about PlayStation?
No, just we're evaluating it from the perspective of someone who's interested in buying it. And I think that's something that our viewers are just going to have to get used to. We are not evaluating it from the perspective of someone who hates consoles and thinks they're stupid.
Yeah.
And we're going to be realistic. Like it was, I don't know. It's tough seeing people say, yeah, it's easy for it's easy for someone like you to come down and millionaire splain to us why it costs so much, but you're just out of touch. And it's like, well, okay, but if someone else said it, would it be more true?
The information doesn't change.
Or less true? Because what it really boils down to is that there's about $250 worth of GPU and SSD upgrade in this thing.
Stop millionaire explaining to me.
And it costs about $250 more, kind of depending on how you want to do the math.
Yeah.
And it's like...
And they're going to make money off it because they have no competition. So that's what companies do. And
it's like... and we're not... I'm not being an apologist. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it is. Sorry.